So, as promised, we're going to bring up some of the people who helped create some of the amazing things we're going to see tonight, like that scene from Frozen. This next person was born in Wichita, Kansas, and studied character animation for 2 years at Cal Arts. Give it up for Cal Arts. Ultimately teaching at the school from 1988 to 1983. He worked as a character designer for such Disney productions as The Little Mermaid and The Rescuers Down Under, before serving as animation director on BB's Kids. He made his feature directing debut with Tarzan and received his first Oscar nomination for animated feature film, Surf's Up. That was with co-director Ash Brannon. Please welcome co-director of Frozen, Chris Buck. Hello, Chris. There's a microphone there for you. But before we start talking, so the next person I'd like to bring up to talk about Frozen received her FMA in film from Columbia University before launching her career as a screenwriter. She received her first screenplay credit on Wreck-It Ralph. I'm kind of sweet on her. Which led to her role as writer and eventually co-director of Frozen with Chris. She's the first female director of an animated film from Walt Disney Studios. How do you like them apples? Please welcome Jennifer Lee. I'm not done. We have one more person. These people have a very important part of movie making. They do a lot of the work. This person was the production manager on Disney's Hercules and the associate producer on Treasure Planet and Chicken Little before serving as producer for The Princess and the Frog and Winnie the Pooh. He received his first nomination for animated feature for Frozen. Please welcome producer Peter Del Vecho. Put her there, pal. Have a seat. Is everyone's microphone working?
Test.
I don't know. Yes.
One,
yes.
two. Yes.
Hi.
All right, so this is the terrifying part. We have to rifle through these notes and... Well, congratulations.
I thought we were supposed to be the terrified ones.
Oh, I'm terrified. I'm really good at answering questions, terrible at asking them. First of all, congratulations on topping the box office of Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh.
Did not see that coming. I thought I was going to ride that top position for quite a while, and it lasted about 6 months. But anyway. So, Jennifer, you and I met on Wreck-It Ralph.
We did.
You sat there in the control room with us while I changed all your words. So why don't we start by saying, by each of you saying, like, how you got involved in this in the first place. Like, this story is loosely based on the Hans Christian Andersen story of the Ice Queen, correct?
It's called The Snow Queen.
The Snow Queen.
But
all
that's
right, my
all
first
right.
mistake of the night.
Oh, jeez.
Those of you scoring at home. So, tell me, Chris, how did you get involved in Frozen?
Well, I pitched it. I pitched it when I came back to the studio in 2008, and I pitched it to John Lasseter and Ed Catmull, and it was an idea that everybody seemed excited about. It was a world that Disney had never done for a whole feature. That's sort of this icy, snowy world. And then this character of the Snow Queen, which was just really, really fascinating. We took some liberties with the story, as we always do. And but yeah, so that's where at least my involvement. That was about 5.5 years ago. So
I loved how you made the audience feel for this person who was in opposition to what was going on for everyone else. You didn't give her the the Snow White treatment of the evil queen. You
we were there.
Made us understand that.
Oh,
yeah.
we did. We went down that road.
You started that.
Oh,
you started it interesting. Yeah. So
do you want to? We can talk about the evolution. But that's where it started, and then Jen came on and Peter came on.
And I was like, no, I'm kidding. It wasn't me. It was all of us. Yeah,
Jennifer, you started writing on this project, and you ended up being one of the co-directors, right?
Yeah, I was still on Ralph, and this guy came in and said, "Hey, you kind of
I sat
like
on the
Frozen."
corner of your desk
Yeah.
and said, "Hey, would you even consider the possibility of writing on Frozen?"
I went, no, it was amazing. I mean, I had connected with it we give notes on each other's projects. So these guys would come in and give notes on Wreck-It Ralph, and we'd go in and Frozen. And I was falling for it heavily, particularly when we decided to make them sisters. I was like, I'd love to tell that story. So it was a definite, obviously. But it was, we didn't know quite. We kind of started over in a lot of ways. And that's where Elsa was a villain when I came on. She was pretty bad, and it was more of like a redemption story.
Right.
But we were like, God, we do good versus evil all the time, and we had just done a bad guy wanting to be good,
Yeah.
And in the original book, there's this theme that runs through it about the power of love over negativity or fear, and we said, well, that's something we haven't done, and we just made sort of Anna represents love, like Gerda in the book, and Elsa represents fear, kind of like Kai in the book, and it went, it made sense. So.
Do you have a sister?
I do. She's coming to the Oscars actually with me.
Oh,
she's my
that's
Elsa.
great.
So.
I don't know if
She
that's a
means
good
that
thing.
in the best possible way.
No, I do.
That
At
was
the end of the movie, Elsa.
I thought that was one of the brilliant things about the film was that really for the first time in my experience with any film, animated or not, this sense of emotional stalemate between two sisters, two women characters. I mean, I think if that's what you brought to this project, no offense, Chris, I'm sure you have a very strong feminine side.
Thank you, John.
He does.
I love the fact that there's something very real about that in a lot of families, about two people trying to reach each other, but they're holding a position, usually based on the past, that they can't let go of. And cartoons are all about metaphors, and that was a really powerful metaphor in this film.
Well, and for us, that's how we knew. That was when we all got really behind the film, and the whole studio did, because we all could relate. Even if it wasn't a sister, but someone in your family, a brother, siblings of any kinds, or any family member. And that's kind of, we said, now we found the emotional engine we needed.
Well, as soon as we found the sister thing, we did a thing called the Sister Summit. And we brought in all the women who wanted to talk about their sisters at the studio. And we thought... Yeah, and we thought that we were going to have all these questions, and we just started with, so who wants to talk about their sister? And everybody did. It just went round and round and round. And
there's this crazy myth that women's stories are not box office. And no matter how many no matter how many ABBA movies we have, or whatever, Mamma Mia's or Frozen's we have, every 3 months it goes back to, until the next Ghost or the next whatever, like women's stories don't sell. It's crazy, because I think that for men and women, a women's story is really
we
appealing.
really
It's a
felt
story
like,
that hasn't been looked at.
Well, we felt like with this, one of the key was not doing princesses that were on some pedestal, like some iconic princesses you don't relate to. We if you make all the characters very real, boy, girl, just relatable, we think men and women will relate to them, that it's not just girls or just boys. And so we just really pushed and having, Kristen Bell. A quick Kristen Bell story I have to tell you, though. There is something that went around the studio, because there's a line she says in the film when Hans is eating Krummkaka, and she goes, "You got it." And the layout people had slowed it down because they were working on it, and they realized it sounds just like Wreck-It Ralph. You got it, when it's slow. And so that's like the catchphrase of the studio is, and we realized, so if you slow Kristen Bell down about 70%, she sounds like John C. Reilly. Okay.
You could fit Kristen Bell inside of my body. She could work me like a puppet. So, Peter, how do you? What's your role in this? Because people think like producers is a set role, but in fact, on every movie I've done, it goes from being the rich guy who doesn't know anything about movies to the person who's actually doing all of the work and every layer in between there. So I'm especially interested in how you synthesize the creative team writing, the animators, the director, and the songwriters who are not in Los Angeles. Is that correct?
That's right. Well, first of all, let me set the record straight. I'm not the rich guy.
Okay. Not yet, baby.
Yeah. I mean, I always view my job as to understand the movie that the directors want to make and help them get it up on the screen. And that takes varying forms. It can be helping choose the staff that's going to be hired to surround them. It could be working with them in the story room or in editorial or the casting of the movie. But it's also to kind of shelter, in a way, create a safe environment for them to do what they do best, and that's be creative. So my role is also to take on the marketing side of it, the budget part of the movie, interfacing with the studio more to allow for that creativity to happen.
Protecting us from...
And as far as Bobby and Kristine goes, we had the good fortune of working with them earlier on Winnie the Pooh, so I was very familiar with them. And we actually went to New York and saw Book of Mormon, saw Avenue Q, and it was at that point, I think Chris said that would be a great match for this film.
Yeah, Book of Mormon would be perfect for a Disney movie.
But could you make it a little more edgy? I think where you're
go edgier, Bobby. Go edgier.
Well, that's cool. I could listen to you guys talk all night. In fact, I would prefer that you talked all night. So,
can I just say one of your? I love all your stuff, but one of my favorite roles that you did was Bigfoot, the strawberry river.
I don't know what you're talking about. Sasquatch is real, and also about 7% of the audience knows what you're talking about. So
it's okay. Sorry,
yeah.
I just said.
So I'm curious. Thank you for pointing out how you synthesized everything, Peter. How am I doing? Okay, so far? Sorry, I have my back turned to you guys. So I'm curious. In my notes I was given, I was told that as you progress with the story and hashing out the script, and I'm fascinated by how all that comes together, even having been through it myself, it's this vast mystery. I would go for these Q&As with the animators, and there'd be 100 people in the room, and I'd be like, what did these 30 people do? Oh, they work the mouth. Like, what? The mouth? My mouth? Anyway, so it's a total mystery to me, which I hope some of these mysteries would be solved. But one of them was like how the story was actually influenced by what these songwriters are doing. And they're very talented people, obviously, from the credits that you mentioned. So how did that play out?
Yeah,
did you give them notes, and were they meant to do it, or was it a back and forth?
It was back. I mean, it was like a chicken and egg. We outlined together, and you'd kind of go, maybe a song here. And the key, is that the most emotional moments will be songs. And so then I'd start writing, and they'd get pages, and we'd start playing. They might do a demo of a song, and then I'll have to rewrite. And I mean, Let It Go changed everything. That was when we really found Elsa, and I rewrote everything around it because we were willing to support it. So we met with them every morning via video conference, and we had a Bert and Ernie poster hanging above the video
Bert and Ernie were supposed to be like, you guys will know some of them. You put characters up there that might remind you of our characters. Yeah. So Bert and Ernie were Anna and Elsa.
Wait, but when they were little, and then but they kept wondering like which one. They kept wondering which one was, Bobby and which was Kristine. We never told them, but we know. But yeah, we did it and it was 14 months every day until we got the final song. I think a back and forth writing.
I have this image in my head, maybe because I just saw Saving Mr. Banks, where it's this team of people sitting at a piano all the time, like, how about this one, Mr. Disney? Rocka, rocka, rocka. I mean, I saw that movie and I was like, I want to work at Disney all the time. I want to be like those guys that horse around on the piano.
It is kind of like that. I mean, they're just the video conference, but Bobby would be like, we're thinking a little, and then Kristine would just say, I've got some, lyrics I'm playing with, and start singing to us. And sometimes they were out in the studio working with us, like Want to Build a Snowman was Bobby, sitting at a piano and us working on it for a whole day together. So they did do that, but we weren't all jazzy dressed and stuff.
And one of you wasn't a horrible curmudgeon like that woman. God love her. I forgot what I was going to say now. I want to thank you. This is not really a question, it's a comment, because, having done a big movie musical that was nominated for an Academy Award, that won many Academy Awards, at that time, everyone said, "Oh, it's the rebirth of the musical," and then no more live-action movies that were musicals. And this thing keeps, in the movie world, seems to keep dying. Like someone will do something and it'll be successful, and then nothing for years. But I have to say, this idea that audiences won't accept suddenly breaking into song, it's bullshit. I mean, look at all the amazing animated films with that's a classic musical structure. The way that, that old phrase, like when you can no longer speak what you have to say, you sing, or when your heart needs to speak, it sings, So thank you for that. Thank you for keeping that alive.
You're welcome. No, people think that it was the studio's idea to do another musical, and it really does come down to the directors, and we wanted to do another musical, so you're welcome.
Yeah, very cool. And I can already tell what's going to happen. It is going to become a live stage show, right?
There are puppet show.
Chris, what about, one fascinating thing about watching the movie was your treatment. Like you mentioned, it's the first time Disney's ever done a film that was this frosty, let's say. I was fascinated by all the geometric rules of how ice behaves. Did you do a lot of research on that? I heard you went to see that ice hotel in Sweden.
Yes, the ice hotel. In fact, we're going back in just a week to the ice hotel.
Are you guys a couple now?
Well,
You're going to canoodle in the ice hotel? Suddenly not so frozen.
No, let's just say he's afraid to stay at the ice hotel. So
I did not stay there last time.
Don't worry.
No.
Don't worry.
No,
no rumors.
I have to say, that sounds like a terrible night of sleep to me. Where am I going to plug in my sleep apnea machine? In an ice outlet?
So yes, we did, but we had other, I can't top this. We had other experts. There was a guy called Dr. Snow who lives in Pasadena.
Like the cold miser from
the
Rudolph
heat by
movie?
the cold miser. Dr. Snow. You got it. And he creates snowflakes in his house or whatever, in his freezer. So he came in and showed us how snowflakes are created. So even Elsa's palace, as you saw, is all sort of based on that snowflake shape. So we followed that. Yes, we did a lot of research, and we didn't get to go. There was a trip to Norway that we did not get to go to because we were working on the story.
Who went?
Thanks, Peter.
Mike Giamo, our brilliant art director, and his artistic team. Yes.
We didn't get to go to Norway on Wreck-It Ralph. We got to make cars out of candy in the office.
And the chop shop in Glendale.
And so the sort of look of the film, I suppose it would be better to ask the art director, some of the people you mentioned, but I'll ask you since you're here, Chris. You used a lot of Norse imagery and Norse mythology and that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, we're not saying it takes place in Norway, but we used a lot of the design elements they have there. These beautiful stave churches, of course, the fjords, and then there's this other folk art that they do called rosemaling, which is this very decorative kind of thing, and we put it in the costumes and the architecture. So there were quite a few things that we got there, but I think the greatest thing that Mike really added to it, Mike has a beautiful eye for color and design, if you guys know Mike Giamo, but what is great is Mike's never done a CG movie. This was his first one. He's always done hand-drawn. And so he brought that sensibility of really pushing shapes, he brought that to CG, and I think that's why it looks so kind of spectacular. So.
I have an idea. Let's meet some of the makers of the Croods. This first person was born in Colorado. There's one person from Colorado here. And at the age of 10 was drawn to animation when he saw Ward Kimball's Three Caballeros sequence on TV's The Wonderful World of Disney. He majored in character animation at Cal Arts. We already clapped for them. Graduating in 1984 and joined Walt Disney Feature Animation in 1987, which is when I graduated from college, FYI. In case you were feeling old. He was the first person hired for their brand new visual development department with this cool thing called computers, I would imagine at the time. He made his feature directing debut co-directing with Dean Debois on Lilo and Stitch. And that earned him his first Oscar nomination for animated feature film. He received his second nomination for How to Train Your Dragon. And his third for this film, The Croods. Please welcome Chris Sanders. Hi, Chris. Welcome. There's a microphone there, so we'll get everyone else up here. This next person began his film career as a screenwriter, and his first credit was 1998's Quest for Camelot. Followed it up with the live-action Racing Stripes, which he wrote and co-produced. He made his feature directing debut with the 2008 animated feature Space Chimps, and began developing The Croods in 2005 as a stop-motion feature with actor-writer John Cleese. Ultimately writing and directing the film in partnership with Chris Sanders, earning his first Oscar nomination for animated feature. Please welcome Kirk DeMicco. Hello, Kirk. Welcome. You don't have to shake hands. You already know each other. Okay, that's good. And finally, the last person on the Croods team that we're going to bring up, although, as all of you may know, hundreds of people behind these movies. This person was an executive producer at the Jim Henson Company on such films as Muppets from Space, yeah, and Five Children and It, before joining DreamWorks Animation in 2005, along with helping develop such films as Puss in Boots, Shrek Forever After, and Rise of the Guardians. She was the executive producer on How to Train Your Dragon. Please welcome Kristine Belson, the producer of The Croods. Enchanté. Practicing my French for our later guests. So congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Should we start with that same boring junket question that you've probably answered 1,000 times, which is how you got involved in this? First of all, I want to say thank you for making a film about my people. When you have a brow like this, you don't get a lot of representations in popular culture. So thank you. I'm actually on the paleo diet right now. Anyway, so this was first developed in 2005 as a stop-motion feature for Aardman. You know, the guys that made Wallace and Gromit. Enough about them. It's about these guys right now. And DreamWorks titled Crude Awakening, which I think is a better title, personally. I love a good pun. So, Kirk, you and John Cleese were writing it together. Was that a nightmare? Is that why it didn't come together?
It's a complete nightmare. He's just not funny, so it was really... I had to do all the work. It was time to be done with it. No, actually, when we first started doing it, it was meant to be a stop-motion film, so it was a different film in the sense that you're making a movie with the scope of 3 or 4 sets. Obviously, we couldn't have told the story we told here. And what happened was just Aardman and DreamWorks stopped working together. They went off their separate ways, and there was a divorce, and Jeffrey got this child in the divorce. And when Chris came over from Disney in 2007, it was the one picture he saw that was still up that he was interested in, and that's when he and I started working on it.
Cool. So, Chris... Sorry.
It's very cool.
I'm tap dancing as fast as I can this stuff. Chris, you moved to DreamWorks from Disney in 2007.
That's what I just said.
On the Croods. I know.
I just said that.
I know. I'm reiterating what you just said. Because when an actor says it, you see, Kirk, people hear it for the first time. Okay. That's why animators don't do the voices in cartoons. So, Chris, you moved to DreamWorks from Disney. So, was there a reason? Were you stolen away? It's going to get uncomfortable here tonight.
I like this part. This is better.
Because I know there's some bitchy infighting that goes on between these studios, and I'm here to talk about it.
No, you know, I just, it was time to try something different. Went over to DreamWorks, and it was my first ever CG film. And I had grown up with traditional animation, and I was really grateful to have written and directed on Lilo and Stitch, which was a traditionally animated film. And they actually asked us at that time, do you want to do this in CG or do you want to do it in traditional? And I thought, at that point, I don't think the technology was up to the task of making those sorts of characters look comfortable to watch, you know. So I waited until I came over to work at DreamWorks, and I was on Croods for about a year. And they came in one day and they called me up to the office and they said, "So Chris, how's it been going?" And I said, "Good, good." And he said, "So it's been a good run." And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm being fired. I've only been here a year and this is it. And they said, well, do you want to go and we're changing things on How to Train Your Dragon. Do you want to come over and work on that? And I said, yeah. And I said immediately, yes. I just had a vibe that I wanted to do it. So I went on to that. And that was, for me, my crash course in all things CG. And I have to say that I love traditional animation and I love CG. I think they both have their own strengths. So I was very grateful to actually be thrown into the middle of that and learn it all so quickly. And it was fantastic. So yeah, it was a good move.
That's one of the kind of stunning things about this film is the 3D look of it. You know, like I watch all the films this year leading up to this thing, of course, and I thought, like, I wonder how much more work is involved to put something into 3 dimensions like that. Is it 3 times the amount of work? These are the idiot questions now that I come up on my on my own.
That's a good question. There are some things in both. There are strengths of both traditional and CG. It takes so much longer to build a CG character, about a year to build the outside, to rig it, to put the surfaces on, and to test it, and then rebuild it and stuff. So about a year to build one of those, as opposed to a traditionally animated character, which you can just draw very, very quickly, and it takes a little bit longer to clean it up. But once that CG character is built, you can take it out of its little virtual garage and actually animate it very quickly. I mean, we can do things at the last minute in CG that we couldn't do in traditional. So
what's your opinion about, when I was at Disney working at Wreck-It Ralph, I said, I want to go in and kind of give you guys motion studies. You can videotape me and maybe Ralph could move like that. And I was like, like that capture thing. And they were like, capture? Please. That's not animation. That's puppetry or something. I know they had a really snobby attitude about capture. They did not want me with ping pong balls all over my body. What's your opinion about that?
Well, that's interesting. We have a motion capture stage, but we don't use it for animation. We actually use it to go down and work with the animators. We do 2 things at once. We'll work with the animators on a scene, and it's actually turned out to be very, very, very valuable because we use it to help us with our layout stage, which, if you're out there and you do this, you know what that means.
It's blocking for
It's blocking for the camera. But the thing that turned out to be really, really valuable about that stage is spending time. We close the doors. We sit there for an entire day with the animators all playing the roles that they're going to play. They're going to animate those roles. We spend hours and hours just running through the scene and again, and we discover so many things and we invent so many things on the spot. So it's actually turned out to be an amazing just study of the scene, and I highly recommend it. It's pretty good.
But the video reference, like you minus the ping pong balls, right? Like just the video reference of you acting, we loved that with our actors. And like Emma Stone in particular, you guys always wanted the animators to study her really closely because you would always say she's like an animated character. And
yeah, we always videotape them while they do the voice.
Session.
During the recording session, we record it, and we
but
quite often
that's really, from the neck up, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking, you do a little bit of movement, but you're restricted because of the microphone.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very cool to hear that you have the actors come in, because I think the more actors do that, the richer it gets, right?
Yeah, and the real goal is to get the actors together, which is sometimes difficult to do. In the old days in animation, you didn't do that because you didn't want the dialogue stepping on each other, but in the good new days. That's totally cool, because that's how dialogue actually sounds.
And it allows improv to exist.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So I'm noticing a trend with these teams of people where the writer worms their way into directing. Now, is that just something you get your lawyers on, Kirk, or?
Wait a minute.
Or it's suddenly become like, wait a minute, like.
Wait a minute. Why am I? Wait, when Jennifer was here, nobody was calling. What's going on?
That was
here?
on my film.
Oh, right, forgot. All right. I just had to make sure of that. Okay, good. Okay, next time let's get Nick Cage. Anyway, so no, you know what happened? Honestly, this is what happened. I was working as a writer, and you know, in writing an animation, you're in the editorial. You're as you know with Jennifer, she was in the recording sessions. We're very much part of that, and so most of the writing. You know, animation is really funny because even directing, it's a little bit of writing, a little bit of acting, a little bit of storyboarding. You do everything together, and everybody comes together. So the one thing that the writer does, and what Chris and I do, because we write, we're directors who write our own scripts. Our main goal is to go, unlike a live action film where you have 300 people or 200 people on the crew, they're all there at the same time. Our world, they're in different buildings, they're in different floors. So we run around from floor to floor. We like run from camera and tell them, this is what they just did in acting. Oh, this is what they just did in art department. This is where we have to go. So we're constantly like there's no real script at any given time. It's just what's in our head, and we're working off of that because it's changing. It's so fluid. So I think that's why, for us, it makes it really good because we can just get an idea and run into the storyboard artist and start working with them, and we just hand it over.
I was just teasing you about being
thank
wormed.
you about that.
Well, I remember very clearly when Chris, it was you who called Jane and I, our other producer on the film, and said, Kirk is doing everything. He's functioning as my partner. We should make that official. We are doing all the creative decisions.
Let us coordinate it.
Cool. I think it's really cool, actually. I commend you for doing it, Chris. Walt Disney could have done that a little bit more himself, I think, back in the day. Share credit with other people, but
wow.
He's a great man, but he wanted his name at the top, and that would be it. I'm never going to work there again.
There you go. No. I was going to say,
pretty much with that, it ended.
Welcome to DreamWorks.
The Disney's. The Disney secret police are taking notes. So, Kristine, the producer's always responsible for everything, for the larger impacts of things. When something becomes scandalous or people don't like it, the first person they hit is the producer. Probably because you're signing the checks or whatever. But so in this movie, you bring to life the fictitious Crudicus.
Oh, the Crudaceous
period? Sorry, yeah. For the screen. Now, what about all those children that are going to school asking to learn about the Cretaceous era? Do you feel like you're kind of in there with the Darwin deniers and those people, faith-based science? Are you a proponent of faith-based science?
We found that even the 5-year-olds understood that this was utterly fictitious, and there was never any confusion from anyone, honestly.
And that's good to hear.
Just avoiding the topic of evolution as much as possible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, don't be afraid. It's like anyone with a brain knows what really happens with evolution.
Yeah, can I just...
I'm going to be fired by more people now.
I was going to say.
So what about, mostly what I know about prehistoric times does not come from the classroom or science at all. It comes from Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble.
That's right.
Exactly. Hear, hear.
And I think it's a big part of the appeal of your film in the first place was that was the path forged for you by those guys. Did you consciously make an effort to say, all right, we're not going to serve brontosaurus ribs? Or, was that something you thought about, repeating those guys?
We did. We talked a lot about what era we should set this in, and we ultimately decided it's going to be after the dinosaurs and stuff like that. It's going to be an all-mammal kind of world. We had a lot of discussions about where we were going to place it in the timeline, and ultimately decided on this invented time period that we would populate with fanciful animals. And to do that, we went to our designers and we started talking about, like, we need a different sort of creature to live in this world. We want people to understand that it's planet Earth, but it's a unique time period. And one of our artists, Shane Pregmore, he did this drawing where he had taken two familiar creatures and he combined them into one. And we thought, that's a great controlling idea for the film, is that it'll be creatures that the theory being, the conceit being, if you went backwards in time, creatures were combined, and that maybe as time rolled forward, they either disappeared or they separated into unique creatures. And so that was our first little foothold into this unique era that we created for the film.
Cool. I want to thank you, as a fan of fireworks, for showing that the first thing man did when he received the gift of fire was make fireworks.
Basically burn everything down.
Yeah. Not warm ourselves or cook the meat. It's like, let's make fireworks. I love fireworks, so I appreciated that. I guess I am a caveman. So along with all the comedy and action, there's a strong emotional element in the film's portrayal of family life. There's some real shit that goes down between the family.
That was
the vodka's hitting me right about now.
That was the marketing tagline. Real shit goes down.
So how did you go about balancing it? Because that's one of the trickiest things about doing things that need to be funny, they need to be exciting, but they need to be real at the same time. Was that something that happened over the course of the script development, or was it on the fly?
I think honestly, that was the biggest thing we do as directors, is to manage that tone and to make sure that those dials are set between the emotional parts and the comedic parts. And there's certain areas for us that we were going to take, even just because we know most of our audience are children, they're kids. And so there'll be places we have in this film that are pretty dark, and there's not a lot of light, there's fire, and there's people running. And to know that there is that joke on the other edge to give that levity, and that would be the biggest laughs, and that's where it comes from, and have that balance. Because we wanted it to feel like a real family, and this was like the first DreamWorks family film, actually with a whole family. The mother's alive, a grandmother's alive. You know? And with that,
grandmother takes a beating, though. I must say,
as well they should. But the thing is that I think that
they're frail creatures in my world.
But I think what we wanted to do is like have that kind of fun on there, but really get to that thing. And what we designed to do is to start the movie in a very broad, the more comedic place, and end up in a more emotional place. That was part of the design.
Yeah, we knew that. I think going into a caveman film, we had this little list of universal caveman expectations, and we actually, within a few weeks of working on the story, we knew this was going to a very heavy place, and because we took a look at the story from a caveman's point of view, and we realized this is a story about like the meaning of life, like Grug, the dad, he does everything he can to keep his family safe, and that means keeping them in the dark, in a cave, because his one and only job is to keep them alive. But is that really living? And so by the end of the film, he actually is throwing his family into the unknown, having learned that life is risk. And so it was a really huge and very, very heavy theme. So we thought, all right, we're gonna come in as funny as we can, and do this really ridiculous, like this hunt sequence where we see, like, first of all, we're going to set the dials as to how resilient and how fast and how strong these guys are, so people understand all that. But then we know that we are going to just hit all these particular points. We said, okay, cavemen, we need a volcano, we need lava, we need like giant animals with tusks, and we had all these different things we wanted to check off the list, so that anybody that sees a caveman film will go, oh, I saw all the caveman things I wanted to see. They were all there.
Except brontosaurus ribs.
Except brontosaurus. We didn't have that.
Croods too.
That's what the sequel's for.
There you go.
Yeah. So we hit all these things, and we got through them, and it was really neat because I think we pulled people in. And hopefully they didn't see, I think, how heavy this was going to be, and we didn't show them that it was coming, so that it would be, I think, more resonant when it came, which I think worked out really well. So
yeah, it's always a punch in the gut when like a really over-the-top Ralph Cramden kind of guy gets sentimental. It's a beautiful thing. You guys co-wrote this film song.
Yeah.
Shine Your Way.
Yeah.
Do they have a piano at DreamWorks that people sit around and go la de la 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 la? Is that how that works? Just like in Saving Mr. Banks,
exactly.
But with Jeffrey Katzenberg?
The curmudgeon. Now I have to find somewhere else to work. We're together.
As soon as I say Katzenberg, no one wants to talk.
Yeah, no, right? You see that? The hush comes over the crowd.
No, I give that credit to Kirk because we knew we needed a song for this one little bit, and we weren't really sure who should go first or who we should approach. And one day Kirk said, you know what? We'll do it. And we sat down and we started writing down thematic lyrics and things like that. And then we called up Alan Silvestri and we asked him if he wanted to help out. And he said, great. We flew up to his house. We spent a day in his studio, and we wrote the song together. It was amazing.
Love that.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the thing that
we
happened
sat around
was really
the piano.
The piano, we actually did.
There you
Alan
go.
played. But the thing we did, and you
Like
could
show
see it
folk.
the show
We
folk.
did.
But you see, like in that clip, the one thing, and you see from the great musical number 4. I mean, music is we don't have musical in the sense that anyone's singing, but we built little homes for the music in this movie.
Yeah.
Very early on, Alan Silvestri was watching storyboards with us 4 years ago. You know, it's not like we just give him a film and you go, please score it, we're done. You know, like traditionally. He came in and he was really a writer with us, and we'd be like, here's a moment. We want this dad to paint this picture of this family, and we need this to resonate. And he laid those themes in, as you would, right from the beginning. So when we asked him, hey, here's what we want to do, he's like, all right, we'll put these themes through. And I think that was the coolest part of working with a composer in animation is he's really in there so much, you know, earlier than you would be in live action. He really becomes part of the process.
He taught me I think one of my most important storytelling lessons when we were working on Lilo and Stitch. There was a moment in the film where Stitch went from bad to good, and we never really put it up on screen. And we avoided that scene. And later on, when he was looking at the reels, he said, "Hey, where's that moment where he goes from bad to good?" And I said, "Oh well, we didn't know how to write it exactly, so we left it out. And we're still working on how we're going to do it." And he said, "Put it on screen, and I'll do it." And I realized, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten completely that music is the greatest storytelling tool you have. And sure enough, we just have a moment where Stitch is on screen, the music shifts, and you know that he changed. And from then on, How to Train Your Dragon and Croods, I've always built homes, and we both are big proponents of this, building little houses for music, where the biggest story turns are going to occur. And we know that we'll let music do the talking in those little parts.
So, I'm going to bring up some of the team that made Despicable Me 2 now. This person comes from a background in comic art, having worked for Marvel and DC Comics from 1994 to 2000. At Blue Sky Studios' 20th Century Fox Animation, he worked as a story artist on several features, including Robots, Ice Age, The Meltdown, and Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who. And in 2007, he conceived, wrote, and storyboarded the Ice Age spin-off No Time for Nuts. Just love saying that. No Time for Nuts, which earned him an Oscar nomination for animated short film. He directed, yes, feel free to clap. He directed Despicable Me and Dr. Seuss's The Lorax and received his first Oscar nomination for animated feature film for Despicable Me 2, which he directed with Pierre Coffin. Please welcome co-director Chris Renaud. Hello, Chris. Welcome. Oh, it's all fun and games while you're in the audience, huh? Now you're up here in the hot lights with me. So this next person I'm going to bring up who helped make Despicable Me 2 studied cinema at Paris Sorbonne University between 1985 and 1988. He moved to England and worked for 1 year as a junior animator at Ambulation, Steven Spielberg's animation studio. Returning to France, he worked as an animator and an animation director on such companies as Ex Machina, Wanda Productions, and Passion Pictures, specializing in commercials, before directing the features, and here's the hard part, Les Toisoirs de Pitt et Mortimer. Magnifique, right? Thank you. And he also co-directed with Chris Renaud, Despicable Me. Please welcome co-director Pierre Coffin. Enchanté. Did I get your last name right? Coffin?
You can say Coffin. I would understand.
I did not want to say coffin. I thought that would be a big faux pas. It's spelled like coffin. Coffin. French always have a way of dressing up things that sound bad. So this next person was he's the producer of Despicable Me 2, or one of them. He was the president of Dawn Steel Pictures before serving for 13 years as an executive at 20th Century Fox, where he became founding president of 20th Century Fox Animation. did quite well, I understand, after his founding, performing executive producer duties on Robots and the first 2 Ice Age films. He is the founder and CEO of Illumination Entertainment, which in partnership with Universal has produced Despicable Me, Hop, Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, and Despicable Me 2, which earned him his first Oscar nomination for animated feature film. Please welcome producer Chris Meledandri. Welcome, sir. Well, here we are. I was wondering how you were going to take this to wherever it needed to go after that first film.
Oh, we were wondering that
after
ourselves.
The first one. That's a tough thing, doing a sequel. It's not for the weak of heart. It's something, when a movie's a success, it's something everyone wants to do, and then they try to do it, and they're like, oh, never mind. It'll never be as good as the first one. I just have to read this, the first part of the synopsis of this movie, which I got from Wikipedia. Imagine you've paid for the first Despicable Me. It's done quite well, delightful movie, and then one of these characters comes in and says, this is what the next one's going to be. A secret laboratory near the Arctic Circle is stolen by a mysterious vehicle using a giant magnet. The Anti-Villain League tries to recruit former supervillain Gru, now a devoted father to Margot, Edith, and Agnes, to find out which evil person stole the lab, which contained a powerful mutagen known as PX41, which can make indestructible and extremely aggressive monsters out of living organisms. They ask Gru because he, being an ex-villain, knows how villains work, but Gru refuses to help, saying he's a legitimate businessman now. Then Gru learns that Dr. Nefario, his friend and assistant... You see what I mean? And I haven't even got to the diving in with a shark into the center of an active volcano part. I guess when something's really good, it makes it easier to pitch the next installment. How did that go for you?
Yeah, it's like, where's the one-line pitch? You're right.
Yeah, I would have been like, oh, whatever, the first one was good. Do your best. I want to be surprised at the premiere. That's why I'm not an executive. So how did that go? Was it a struggle figuring out like where to go? Because it was so warm and fuzzy at the end of that last one. It's like how do you continue the warm and fuzzy but make it exciting?
I think some of our biggest that sounded like some of our story meetings, that Wikipedia description. No, I think the biggest problem with a sequel is, we ended that in a very finite way. That Gru was, no longer a villain. I think we talked about it briefly. Would he continue in the second film? But it felt like he'd left that behind in a very definite way. So how do we, knowing that, the high concept of the first film was making a movie about a villain, and part of that is his attitude. So how do we find ways to maintain that attitude if he's not a villain anymore? So, some of the things like we dealt with, we're all have children. So it's like one of the first things we talked about was, what's the next phase of parenthood for Gru and how can that frustrate him? And so ways we found for his personality to emerge were putting him against things like, a new partner who's very, bubbly and positive, or his oldest daughter dating a boy who he hates. Putting him against things that would allow his personality from the first film to emerge.
And I love how you kind of kept the fact that he's a villain. That's kind of like he's a carpenter. Well, he's a villain. It's like he doesn't have to continue to do bad things, but that's still who he is, a villain. I love that conceit. That's a job for a lot of people. Like,
yeah, that was kind of the part of the high concept too. Was like, we used to use as a one-liner, like, what if Darth Vader had to adopt and take care of three little girls? It's like Darth Vader's got to go home, take off the helmet, and take care of his kids. So it was that's part of the idea is like, what's the everyday life of a supervillain?
So, how did you hook up with this French fellow here?
Well, I found him.
I didn't want to come.
No. He was a tough sell. But when I started this company, as you mentioned, about 7 years ago, when I started the company, there were a number of people who I knew that I wanted to work with after having been at Fox. One of them was Chris Renaud. We had worked together at Fox Blue Sky. Our writers, Cinco Paul, Ken Dario, and designers, but I had not thought about where we were going to be able to make the film, you know. And we started to develop the first Despicable Me, but I soon realized that it was so competitive for animation talent in the United States that I wasn't going to be able to attract 200-300 really world-class artists in California or virtually anywhere in the United States because I was a startup.
So you found a starving Frenchman.
So
got him for cheap.
But one of the great, it's actually not so much of a secret, but there are just wonderfully gifted French artists working in animation.
As we'll soon see later in our program, in addition to this fine gentleman here tonight.
So in looking for another place where we could gather that number of great artists, it led me to Paris, and I looked at a number of small companies there and wandered into one which was called McGuff, and they started showing me some of Pierre's work, and after about 5 or 10 minutes, I was completely hooked, and then went out and tried to convince him to join our group and introduce these two guys, and we ended up convincing him.
Well, congratulations. Did you ply him with
He tried a lot
French
of stuff.
champagne?
Cheese and cigarettes. And
So, Pierre, you're currently developing a spin-off film on these lovable yellow creatures, the Minions, with Sandra Bullock and John Hamm. What am I, chopped liver? I'm just Wreck-It Ralph for the rest of my life. No. Tell me about that. Like, you're already doing a spin-off from. So I would assume if this movie's done so well, you'll do a third installment of this, and then in addition, these guys are going off. Like, can you tell us anything about that?
Sure. Well, we had this idea that sort of lingered from. I'm sorry for my English because it's getting bumpy, especially
Much
with
better
all
than
that.
my French.
But
Believe me.
Well, that drinking and that not eating is not helping. So, but it is like we had this idea like on the first two movies where we sort of always wondered about a sequence where we would show the Minions being created somehow, but like out of an egg or it was like some sort of a Dr. Nefario contraption. And then we always ended up, like on the first movie and on the second one, like removing that sequence from those movies. And luckily, lucky for us that we did, because we started talking about like the eventuality of making a movie just with the Minions, and we found our way in. Luckily, just because we hadn't done all this myth about the Minions being, genetically engineered. So that helped us a great deal. And then the first, basically, we're going off a concept where the Minions have always existed, even as like little single cell creatures, and then we go off from that and have them. We create this principle where the Minions, in whichever form, have always wanted to work for the most evil character of their time, and so we see them in time, like working for like a Tyrannosaur and Dracula and all these like fictionist or real characters. That's the first 10 minutes. I'll be fired if I say more. But
I think that sounds like an homage to animators. These minions that work for the most evil people in the entertainment industry, often uncredited, working in a cellular-like structure, autonomous, yet slaves. That was a joke for the animators in the audience. Sorry. It is kind of a fascinating way that animation works. I think you guys would even acknowledge, I think any of the directors here tonight would acknowledge that you're kind of marshaling this enormous army, and there's no way that a single person can really maintain control. Like, at least my experience was, you're fielding all kinds of ideas being generated like minute by minute, So what's that like? Like, how often do you find yourself saying, no, come back this way, or do you use kind of an unfettered approach, like, let's just go crazy? Or
I think it depends on what phase you're in, but I think that you can. there are sometimes, people will, go over here, a story artist or something, and you have to bring it back. But I do think, for me personally anyway, part of the philosophy is hoping to find an idea better than yours. If you say something to a story artist or an animator, you can sometimes give a specific idea, or sometimes you're like, well, this doesn't work. How do we make it better? You really want something that almost surprises you to come back. I mean, you're right. You have this super talented army behind you, and I think any animation director is the benefits from great ideas from every corner of the room, and you just hope they're better than what you've originally thought of.
How does that relate in terms of what the actors bring, like when they come in to record the voice? Because I always wonder, like, I was encouraged a lot when I was working on Wreck-It Ralph to bring in a lot of stuff, and then I thought, like, at a certain point they're going to start to say, like, no more ideas. We've already drawn that scene. Like how much flexibility do you try to keep with the actors? And
we actually try to keep quite a lot, because we record, before it gets hard to make changes typically, which is animation. So, we'll come in. I mean, a perfect example is, for our films is Steve Carell. We came in and we knew, he had the thought. We discussed with him a little bit about the potential of doing an accent for the character.
That's great accent.
Yeah, which I mean, so we didn't know what it would be. He had this thought, so we had some, the pages, and we started playing with it. And he actually did a few ideas, but I think very quickly, started to zero in on what this would be. And then I think now, of course, he's so, particularly when we started on the sequel, he knows it so well. I think like any actor, well, in the first film, there's an element of discovery, which can sometimes, it needs to be shaped a little bit. So sometimes we'll re-record and say, oh, this needs to be stronger here, just because part of it is discovery. But now he's so comfortable in the character, you don't really go through that anymore. It's just he knows it, inside and out.
Yeah, it's a really pleasurable day at work for an actor, I have to say. I can't speak for everybody, but I know that the length of time that you get to work on things, how intimate your friendships get with the people that you're working with, and the fact, Wreck-It Ralph was the longest job I've ever had in my whole life. So that doesn't say much for my reliability as an employee, but... So in my notes I was given here, it says the original idea for Despicable Me came from an animator named Sergio Pablos. Is that true, or is that just some note that Randy made up?
No, it's true. Sergio Pablos is a Spanish animator who had worked at Disney, and then he moved back to Spain and started a small animation studio there. And shortly after our starting Illumination, he came to see me, and he had about 4 different ideas. And what was wonderful about it, the best pitch I've ever had, which is he pitched in imagery. He pitched with imagery, and he had the very core story of this villain who ends up adopting 3 little girls and to commit a crime, and through the process ends up finding love for the first time. And there are actual scenes in the first movie that come right out of some of the drawings, the 16 or 18 drawings he pitched the very first time. Of course, all the character design, the story in the movie has changed dramatically from design and many facets of storytelling. But the very core and the heart of it was in Sergio's pitch.
And is he still alive? And so I don't know anything about him. So is he still someone you communicate with about the general direction, or was he just an inspiration and then you guys moved on? And
he worked with us. He worked with us on the first film. We used his team in Spain for a lot of the early storyboarding as to contribute to that. And he's somebody that we still communicate with and talk to about new projects, but he wasn't directly involved in the sequel. So
were there any things that you guys were not able to do in the first one that you were, when it came time to do the sequel, you're like, finally, a lipstick taser or whatever,
I think for us, a lot of it had to do, which may be boring, a lot of the technical things.
There's lots of technical, boring people out here, so please.
Well, that's right. That's right. Developing fur shaders. No. So for us, because, when we were coming to, and Pierre and I were working together for the first time, we were coming to what was then MacGuff. It really was, just sort of the pipeline had been used to create one film previously, but for us it was like making the pipeline work and sort of making decisions based on the amount of time we had. A lot of what we did initially were policing mistakes. A jacket, sleeve would pop off or something like that. And so it was really just trying to find out what our system was going to be to make the movie. So for us, the fluidity that we have now over the course of what's been 3 movies now, and minions with hair and huge crowds of minions, and the way we can animate them, all that's very exciting for us because as we were building the factory, we had a lot of glitches to get through.
Well, it's a real amazing accomplishment. It's one of the films that we're looking at tonight that I feel like is in the straddles this place between traditional flat animation and the 3D look of like the Croods. You guys, there's a 3D element. There's a lot of finished detail all the way around the characters, but it still looks like a traditional animation. So anyway.
About what?
I think
I was just going to comment on that. Oh. Well, no, I think that's
You're so
something
right.
yeah, I guess there isn't anything else to say. No, that's something Pierre and I actually both try to strive for, and our designer, Eric Guillon, is a big element of that, is a very simple graphic sensibility. And I think, obviously, the minions, really, they're basically Tic Tacs with a goggle put on them. So, they really typify that approach.
It must be so satisfying, like when you make a film, because let's face it, anytime you make any film, you really got to think of it as a one-off. You're not going to, there's a good chance you're not going to get a chance to take the story further. So congratulations on having such a great success with the first one, that you got to make a second one. So we're going to meet a couple of the people behind this film. The first is one of the co-directors. He recently graduated from film school, or he had recently graduated from film school. He's 90 years old now. No. I don't think that's right now. When he was hired to work as an animator on Ernest and Celestine, so he actually did just graduated from film school, ultimately becoming one of the film's directors along with Vincent Patard and Stéphane Aubière. This is his first nomination for animated feature film. Please welcome co-director Benjamin Renner. How you doing? So we're going to have some translation help, too. You have to remind me of your name. I've already forgotten. I'm sorry. When you come up. So this next person is the producer, or one of the producers of Ernest and Celestine. He originally began working in the film industry as an assistant director and later as a director of educational documentary films before moving into animation. In 1987, he founded Trans Europe Film, producing such animated features as Tales of the Night. In 1994, he founded La Amateur, whose productions have included the animated feature nominees The Triplets of Belleville, and The Secret of Kells. Please give a warm welcome to Didier Brunner, the producer. Enchanté. Tell me your name again, I'm sorry. Fred Cassidy is going to help us talk French.
Impressed.
Well, this is when I really start to fall short in the language department. So we were talking earlier about saving Mr. Banks. Go ahead, you can translate.
No,
I'll do small chunks. All right.
I'm sorry.
So, and the reason I bring it up is because that's a story about a writer of a book who was very reticent to have her film made into some silly cartoon, and ultimately the animators triumphed. And apparently behind this story is a similar story, although I'm sure she wasn't as cantankerous as that woman. Gabrielle Vincent was the creator of the books, and she hadn't wanted a film version to be made during her lifetime. And you tried for 20 years to convince her? Is that true?
Yes, I tried to convince her, and finally she did. She died.
She died.
And then 8 years later, the publisher called me and say, "You want always the right of the books of Gabrielle Vincent?" And I say, "Of course, yes." And we did the film 8 years after the death of this great artist that I really respect. But she, from when she was alive, she was completely opposed to the adaptation of her books.
Why was she so opposed? Was it
because she thought that it was impossible to adapt her graphism for animation. Her graphism is the graphism of an illustrator, very simple and very sophisticated in the same time. And she was convinced that the cinema will betray his graphism and the style and the spirit of her books. I'm sorry, I try to speak English.
No.
I do my best.
I understand perfectly. Yeah. Well, congratulations on overcoming her reticence, even though she never quite acquiesced. She acquiesced in an eternal kind of cosmic way. No disrespect at all. I can understand that. You know, like someone spends their life drawing and slaving over these things, and it's understandable that, you know, she wouldn't trust a character like you to, despite 20 years of pleading. But I have to say, I did not know her books before I saw the film, but I thought the film was executed in a beautiful, very subtle and very, it had a simple purity to it, and I think she would have been proud.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Benjamin, you were one of 3 directors on the film, along with Vincent Patard and Stéphane Aubier. Merci. So what was that like working? I think we've only spoken to co-directors, and that's usually a good cop, bad cop situation. How was it working with the 3 of you?
Honestly, it was really well. The thing was, when I started working on the film, I was not supposed to be the director, but 1 year after I started working...
He doesn't want to be the director.
I didn't want to be the director because I was exiting school, and I met this guy, and he told me, "Do you want to be the director?" And I thought, okay, this guy is completely crazy, but he made good films, so he must have good ideas sometimes. And so I told him, okay, but I need to have a co-director with me. And as he's a very good producer, he gave me 2 co-directors, and it was Vincent Patard and Stéphane Aubier. They come as a pair, actually. They are sort of couple. I mean, they work together all the time. And I don't know what they do in private life, but they're really nice people. And they made a very peculiar film called A Town Called Panic. It's a wonderful film, yeah, for those who knows. And it's stop-motion film. So we started working together, and we realized we have a passion for the film, and I was supposed to work on the artistic part of the film, and they were supposed to work on the narrative part of the film. So, but at some point we realized we had to share everything together, and we were all very modest people, so we were not like trying to impose anything to the other. So we trusted each other, so it was really great, I think. They are not here to tell what happened, so I can tell whatever I want.
They're doing a Q&A in Paris right now where they're talking about what a nightmare it was to work with you. So Didier, I couldn't help but notice some similarities to this rodent underworld and another film that was recently very popular, an animated film called Ratatouille. Now, yes, it was fine. We're not talking about that tonight. But it was very good. I'm sure people involved in it are out there. But the reason I say that is because oftentimes in the movie business, you'll be developing something, and all of a sudden something comes out that's similar to it, and then that's it. They pull the money, everyone says, well, it's been done, and the sensitive sort of creative people just get upset, and they, I have to do something else. How did you get over that, and did it even enter your thinking, the fact that Ratatouille had a similar world, at least for the rodents?
The story of the books was very simple, and the point which excites me is why a bear and a mouse could build such a complicity. They are coming from two words completely different. The big bear, the very small mouse, and the mouse is is an animal which is unsupportable for the bear, because in the film she stole the teeth of the bears, yeah, to repair their teeth. I'm sorry, I'm not very clear.
No, I understand exactly what you mean. That was I mean, hats off to you for not even acknowledging Ratatouille and just sticking to your guns. I would imagine after 20 years of trying to convince this woman to do it, you're like, fuck Ratatouille, we're still making it. Just because the rats, everyone knows rats have an underworld. We're still making this story, it's important. And in fact, that was a really moving thing. I think human beings in some way are just suckers for this repeating story, whether it's Romeo and Juliet or West Side Story or on and on and on. This idea that friendship and compassion for people or creatures other than that are different than yourself in the face of societal condemnation. And I thought, although this is a very sweet and innocent, almost children's story, that there were some very powerful themes at work that are shared by things like Romeo and Juliet. Were you thinking about that as you were making it? Is that why the book appealed to you in the first place?
What? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
D'accord.
No, I'm so sorry. It's
my favorite French word, d'accord.
I thought we were losing someone that was laughing here, so I was just
I don't know what happened to that lady. Yeah. She's freaking out.
So,
translate, exactly. Let's take a moment to translate.
Oui. Non, c'est deux mondes qui s'opposent. Là, je help translator. Please.
That they're two opposing worlds.
Nous ont inspirés, et c'est vraiment le fondement de l'histoire du film. C'est de raconter l'histoire de deux êtres qui sont à la fois marginaux dans leur société et qui ont en plus aucune raison de construire une histoire de complicité entre eux. C'est un film sur la différence et à la fois sur la tolérance. L'idée, c'était de raconter aux enfants comment deux personnages qui n'ont rien en commun, ni la culture, ni les aspects physiques, ni peuvent arriver à se rencontrer et à construire quelque chose de tendre et d'unique, de presque de familial entre eux.
Okay.
Go.
All right. So this opposition of two worlds was the very foundation and the spark that really started the entire story. And that here you have two very different creatures that in their own worlds, they're marginalized. And so the great improbability that they would meet and that they could even find a sense of compatibility or friendship was something that was exciting to explore. And also, since this is a film for children, the message that this unlikely friendship carries is one of tolerance and of compassion and friendship.
I really love that about this film. Yes, thank you. You know, so many of the films that are animated films that are made here in the States, they have this 4-quadrant thing they're always going on about, where it has to appeal to little tiny children, it has to appeal to, you know, older kids and teenagers who are smart asses, and adults have to have a few jokes too. I thought that was a really refreshing and beautiful, innocent thing about the film, that it has the gentle quality that I actually really enjoyed, even though my much younger child also just was entranced by it. So hats off to sticking to your guns in that way. Can I ask, are the books by this author very popular in France?
The books are very popular in France and in Belgium. That's why we have a French director and 2 Belgian directors. They are very popular, but not the author is dead, so now there's no new books. So we decided to replace by a film.
Yes. I think we've established that she's dead. Benjamin, were you familiar with these books as a child?
No, I didn't know anything about the books before.
You better start making up something for the press junkets where you said you did love them as a child.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to see them when I was a child. But I think, to be honest, I think that was a good thing because I had no pressure of nostalgia while I was doing the film. And honestly, when I discovered the books, it was like a strike. I don't know, you know, when you're struck in the heart or something like this. I don't know. Yeah. You understood?
Struck
Maybe?
In the heart. We get it.
I was really blown away by the books, and I thought it was wonderful drawings, and there was so much sensitivity in the drawings and so much expression. If you have the opportunity of reading them, it's really wonderful. There's one called Birth of Celestine, and it's one of the most wonderful books I've ever read in my life. And to be honest, the last picture in the film are the pictures from this book, so it can give you an idea of the wonderful drawings she was making. So yeah, it was just a pleasure having this drawing and putting it into animation.
So the animation process, was it a process of deconstructing the drawings of this person and moving them? Because there is a kind of looseness to the drawing style. Yeah. Did you find yourself trying to actually take this person's drawings and make them move, or did you wipe the slate a little more clear than that and use the books as a story inspiration?
Well, at the very beginning, I was not supposed to work on the story, so I was just focusing on the drawing, and I was taking the illustration and just drawing them and starting to make them move, like make them living, and I really wanted this sketchy looking way of drawing, and with these gaps, and just when you make a drawing and you stop, when you see it's working, when you have your character is here and you see the emotion he is expressing, and that's what we had for the direction, for the animation, for all the rest. I really wanted everyone to have a pleasure of drawing this way, because it's more like sketching more than making very precise drawing, very beautiful drawing. Wanted to make something very fast.
That's a difficult thing to try to take on someone else's drawing style. That's a special challenge for an animator, I would imagine. One of the things I really loved about the film was how there's a purity to the emotion of the story, and there's a purity to the way the characters speak. There's also a purity to the comic, physical stuff that happens. I'm a big Laurel and Hardy fan, and a lot of the kind of pratfalls, there's a lot of the movie that operates in silence without a lot of words, and I thought that was really another level of purity, was like the gags, you know, the falling and the, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Je vous compris.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Harold Lloyd and Buster Keaton and all this kind of humor. We tried to put some of this in the film, and yeah.
They were Americans, those people, by the way.
Yeah.
But silently.
Yeah. But they are good. I mean, so.
Yes. Sorry. I wanted to also mention that because the next film we're going to look at is by the great master Miyazaki, and you've mentioned that you found his work to be an inspiration for your work, and seeing that you're just relatively new, like, you want to talk about that a little bit? Like, what was the first film of his that struck you, and what were the things that formed your young identity as an animator?
Yeah, my identity. So let's talk about that. I was actually, when I was young, until I was 18, I was forbidden to watch any Japanese film because my parents were thinking it was very violent and stuff. So they had little prejudice about that. So when I was 18, I was allowed to see my first manga anime, and it was Spirited Away, and. And sorry, I have to take my breath. And and it was really great. Sorry, a lot of emotion right now.
I feel it too. It was that film was a revelation to me as well.
Maybe Didier can talk about his identity. I don't know.
Thank you very much.
Well, I love Miyazaki. That's all I can say. It's a wonderful director, and it's such an honor to be here.
It must be a heady thing, right? I have to say, I really relate to how you're feeling about it in that way, in terms of this whole Oscar thing that happens to you. You're a young man, you come out of school, someone says you want to work in a movie, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the company of a great master like Miyazaki, and I can really relate to that. It's a heady thing, but let me just say, soak it up, kid. Because these are the things that you remember as life goes on. It's a very joyful time, even though it's terribly scary as it trundles along. Anyway, I think that's a perfect time to take a look at our final clip of the evening. Thank you so much for this film and for talking with us tonight.
Thank you.
So, Hayao Miyazaki couldn't be here tonight, but I think he's earned the right to stay home. His producers come here tonight to talk to us about The Wind Rises. Now, this gentleman had enjoyed a long career in magazine publishing when his working relationship with filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki began. After helping with the publication of Miyazaki's manga Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind and the resulting feature film version, he helped establish Miyazaki's animation production company called Studio Ghibli. He joined the company as a producer in 1989 and served as its president from 2005 to 2008. He continues as the company's managing director, and his films as a producer include Princess Mononoke, the aforementioned Spirited Away, and Howl's Moving Castle. Please welcome the producer of The Wind Rises, Toshio Suzuki. You gonna join us? Tell me, miss, what is your name? Beth Carey's going to help us translate. I tried to learn Japanese this week.
Did you learn anything?
Arigato.
Good.
We're off to a good start. So, Toshio, I understand Miyazaki originally wrote this story as a graphic novel or a manga, and that you suggested it to him to become a film.
その通りです。
That's exactly right.
All right. So far, so good, Randy.
勉強してますね。
You studied a lot about the film.
I've got it all right here. So I have to say, when I read that, I thought it was very surprising because given the subject matter, the fact that the story is about a designer of warplanes for, you know, a terrible, tragic war for the world, that the producer would be the one to say, we should make this a movie. There goes our good start.
いやだってプロデューサーはですね、なんて言ったらいいかな、野じ馬ってわかります？監督が困るであろう題材を提案した方がいい作品ができるんですよ。
A producer is somebody who sort of sits at the sidelines and just comments and pricks comments to the director. So it's best if we, as producers, suggest ideas that are troubling to the director.
Interesting. Because a producer in America is someone who tries to get the director to avoid troubling ideas.
だって彼はね、本当はその前にポニョっていうのを作ったんですけどね、それのパート2をやりたいって言い出したんですよ。それで僕はね、あんまり見たくなかったんです。
The director had just made a film called Ponyo, and he was talking about making part 2 of Ponyo, a sequel to Ponyo. And I didn't want to see a sequel to Ponyo.
Another huge difference between producers in Japan and America.
いや宮崎監督はですね、70歳かな時に初めてね孫ができたんですよ。それでどうしてもその孫のために映画を作りたい、そういうことを言い出したんですね。それでね、僕そういう時ってね大体うまくいかないと思ってるんですよ。だから多分そういうね気持ちを捨ててちゃんと映画を作ってもらいたい、そういうことであれを提案しました。
So when director Miyazaki was 70 years old, he had his first grandchild was born, and he started thinking he wanted to make films so that this grandchild could see the films. And I think that kind of idea behind making a film never goes well. So I wanted him to throw away that sense that he wanted to do it because he had a new grandchild, and to throw that idea away and to make a different kind of film.
So you must have a very strong relationship with Miyazaki to be able to say these difficult things to him. That's very impressive. I would be just, bowing all the time and be just so delighted that to help him make whatever he wanted to make. Because it's true, he himself was worried that the film, given its wartime subject matter, wouldn't appeal to younger audiences.
Mm, っていうのかね、彼はですね、宮崎駿は実は今まで皆さんにねあまり知られてなかったと思うんですけれど、戦争とそしてね兵器について非常にね知識がある人だったんですよ。だけどそれは自分の趣味にとどめなきゃいけない。 でそれを題材に映画を作るっていうのはね、彼はまあもともとやる気はなかったし、やっちゃいけないと思ってたんですね。
You may not know this about Hayao Miyazaki, but he has a lot of interest in war and also in war weapons and airplanes that were used as weapons. But he considered it his own interest and his own personal hobby, and had thought that he shouldn't make a film just out of his own hobby.
だからさっき漫画でこの原作に相当するものを書いてたんですけどね、それは今の映画とはちょっと違ってましてね、登場人物がね全部ね豚だったんですよ。これでまあね少しなんていうのかな、茶化しながらなんか書くみたいなことをやってたんですね。
So he had drawn a graphic novel, manga novel of this theme, but all the characters were pigs. So it was a bit of trying to make fun of the situation as well.
Huh, interesting. So do you think that was some type of commentary? You know, he's used pigs before in Spirited Away when the parents become pigs at the beginning of the film. Do you think he was saying something about that when he made the graphic novel? Was that some type of comment on this, the people behind? Like, was everyone in the story pigs, or was it the people who were promoting war who were pigs, or?
その通りです。その通りです。全員が豚でした。
All the people in that manga were pigs.
Interesting. I want to just say at this point, I want to apologize for my goofy questions. I feel compelled to say right now what a profound impact these films have had on me, and I want to thank you and Miyazaki for bringing so much beauty into the world.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to sound like an ignoramus again. And again, I'm sure there are much more eloquent people in the audience that could speak to the subtleties of the art of these films. But like Benjamin, oh, we need a towel, Claire.
Sorry.
It's just water. It's okay. You've been baptized by Hollywood.
Please excuse me.
ごめんなさい。
I'm sorry.
No
I'm
worries.
sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I did not mean to give you an exploding water bottle. So was this a difficult subject? I've never been to Japan, but I would imagine if this was a story about a German tank designer, there would be somewhat of an anguished reaction from the public in Germany today. So what was that like presenting this film to the Japanese public?
いや明らかに宮崎駿はですね、ドイツよりもイタリアが好き。映画を見るとすぐ分かりますよね。だから僕もちょっと悩んだんですけれど、でももう彼がそう言うんだからね、しょうがないと思いました。
So from seeing the film, you can obviously see that he really loves German and Italian engineering and design. Yeah. And I was wondering about that a little bit myself, but I just let him do what he wanted to do.
Yeah. I'm sorry to get bogged down in political ramifications or audience reactions. In fact, I don't think that matters a whit for art. I think, I think the point that the film makes, and I think from some of these quotes I have, I think the original inspiration Miyazaki might have had was, he said, my wife and staff would ask me, why make a story about a man who made weapons of war? And I thought they were right, but one day I heard Horikoshi once had said, all I wanted to do was make something beautiful. And if that's not a statement about a filmmaker that a filmmaker would make, I don't know what is. There's no question in that statement.
堀越二郎っていう人は実在の人だったんですけれど、なんていうんですか、これまでゼロ戦を作ったとしてした人として人に誤解されるような伝え方がいっぱいされてきた。それをね、宮崎駿はこの映画で本物の堀越二郎はこうだったに違いない。これで今までのそういう俗説をね、全部ね、なんていうんだろう、なくしたかったんですね、彼の名誉のために。だから映画ができて、そして実は堀越二郎の息子さんっていう方がいらっしゃってね、この映画を見ていただいて、その方がすごくそのことを喜んでくれたんですよ。でそれをご本人から聞いて、宮崎駿はすごく喜んでました。
Obviously, Jiro Horikoshi, is this on?
Talk a little closer.
Was a real live person who lived, and he was known as the designer of the Zero Fighter. And Mr. Miyazaki had thought that he was misunderstood in the various interpretations historically that had been made of him. And he wanted to present the real, what he felt was the real Jiro Horikoshi as he must have been. To kind of for in his honor, to make his honor stand out. And so after the film was released, his son, Mr. Horikoshi's son, saw the film and was very glad that his father's honor had been reset. And Mr. Miyazaki was very happy to hear that, because that was one of his intentions in making the film.
Yes. I think a lot of the geniuses who are harnessed to war efforts across the world are actually just that. They're honorable people who are geniuses at a certain thing, and the world takes them to war. I wanted to talk a little bit too about the actual art of these films, and I'm definitely unqualified to be discussing it. But you said that Miyazaki wanted to bring forth the truth of this character, and there's something about the animation style, and I see it in almost all the films. This juxtaposition of lush, almost photographic, but better than photographs, depictions of landscape as a background in the scenes, and then the people who are a much more traditional, almost two-dimensional animation style, and yet somehow they seem more real than a photograph would be. And I wonder if that's something that you discuss or it's something that just comes from Miyazaki, he does on his own, and you witness it, but do you ever discuss these things? And I'm sure it's intentional, the difference between those two styles of animation within the films.
今度の映画をやるときに、この風立ちぬを作るときに、彼が一番考えたのがですね、その美術だったんですよ、まず第一に。それで、まあ、なんていうんだろう、彼はもともとね、アニメーション映画を作るときには美術が一番大事なんだってことをね、常々言ってますから。で、まあ、当然、ゼロ戦が出てくるんでね、そういうことも考えたんでしょうけれど、戦闘機が出てくるんでそういうことも考えたんでしょうけれど、この映画の中でいろんな雲を描いてみようと。これはね、彼がですね最初から主張しまして、それでまあスタジオジブリっていうのは、まあ、3階建てのビルがあるんですけれどね、一つはその毎日夕方になるとその3階へ来てですね風景を見るんですよ。そうするとちょうど夕闇が迫る頃、その雲が美しい、それをね毎日彼は自分で見る。で頭の中にスケッチをするんですね。それともう一つ非常にね素晴らしいご指摘だと思うんですけれど、ロシアの風景画家でねレビタンっていう人がいるんですけどね、でこの人のね、描いた映画彼が大好きで、今回これを参考にしてねやろうではないかと。っていうんで美術のスタッフに、そのレビタンの絵をいっぱい見せる、そういうことをやりました。
In making this film, and in making all of his films and all of the films at Studio Ghibli, we really pay a lot of attention to the background art. He obviously, to make a beautiful film and to make the background beautiful, and that's one of the very important aspects of Studio Ghibli films. And he knew that we would be using a lot of airplanes in this film, warplanes. So Mr. Miyazaki wanted to draw many different kinds of clouds. At Studio Ghibli, we have a building that's a 3-floor building, and he would come up to the 3rd floor, to the top floor, and look out at the landscape, especially near sunset time, when the clouds would be beautiful, and sketch those clouds in his mind. And then he also told the background art staff to look at the paintings of the Russian painter Levitan, and that those paintings were wonderful, and that they should study them to work on the clouds and the artwork.
Fantastic. Well, I feel like we've just scratched the surface. I could ask so many questions about Studio Ghibli because, you know, like Benjamin said, I did not have a big exposure to Japanese animation until I was an adult. I think maybe one of the only things which I think may have been drawn in Japan was Speed Racer that I watched as a kid. And so when I first saw Spirited Away, suddenly it looked a little bit like Speed Racer, but...
Maha 555.
What's that?
It's, in Japanese, it's
Mach
555.
Mach 555. Of course, the Mach 5. So anyway, so Spirited Away was such a revelation because you had this simple kind of, you know, I was used to a certain simple visual information, but then these transformative things started happening, like pure magic was jumping out of the screen. And I just have to say, like, suddenly I was like, where is this Studio Ghibli? It was like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It was this mysterious place. How is it that they're able to produce these beautiful things? And I think if we had more time, I would love to discuss the difference between how organizationally and creatively and the entire culture of Studio Ghibli, because it needs to be replicated elsewhere in the world because it's producing some of the most beautiful art of our time.
どうも。あ、フィニッシュ終わりですか？終わりなんですかこれで。
Oh, Is this it?
Well, we're going to bring the rest of the filmmakers up, but yeah. So stay here. You look very comfortable, by the way. I love your style. Very comfortable. Although it's a little moist now, but. So I'd like to ask everyone to come back up on stage who we've spoken to tonight. We're going to add some chairs. I'm going to ask some sort of general questions. Do I have a general? Yes, I do. Come back up. Don't be shy. I won't spill water on you. I'm definitely getting a talk show out of this. For sure. 3 languages? Come on. So, yeah, so I have some general questions, and if there are any questions out there that you have, they better be good. Because there's some, so don't just ask like, what was Nick Cage like? So, what was Nick Cage like? No. So we've experienced 3 of the films tonight with 3D goggles, and I want to know, and Randy wants to know, did the decision to release the film in 3D influence the design of the film from the beginning? Because a lot of films I've noticed, they kind of tack on like, oh, we can add more screens if we suddenly make it 3D. Of your 3 films, The Croods, Despicable Me 2, and Frozen, was that part of the design process from the very beginning? Or was it something that you accommodated later?
Yeah, well, for us, yeah, we knew it was going to be 3D from the beginning. So yes, we did design things. We did try to watch that we didn't do a lot of the stuff flying at you, which people seem to not be crazy about, at least here in the States. And so yeah, we tried to restrain ourselves a bit, but we knew from the beginning it was going to be 3D.
So yeah, it was made in parallel, the exact same time, really, along the way.
Croods.
Well, I think we used to exercise more restraint, but one day I was getting my hair cut, and the girl who was cutting my hair, I was telling her about the film, and she's asking me, and I said, oh man, we're doing all this 3D stuff, but we're trying to we don't want us to, we don't want stuff to just jump out at you, and she was like, well, that's what I pay for. And I was like, maybe we should do more of that. So in Croods, we didn't really hold back as much. We just let it go a little bit more. But one of the cool things about Croods is we had these a couple moments where we had the characters in the dark, and we had like firelight and these little embers and stuff like that. It was a unique moment to have these embers come out into the audience as far as we could push them. But the theater and the cave really became one because it became seamless. You couldn't see the edges of the screen. It was just one of those things that you look for opportunities like that. We just got lucky with a couple of those as well.
How about you guys down there? Despicable Me 2. I mean, the initial promise of 3D was shit jumps out at you. From the 1950s. I think that was the tagline on those movies. Shit jumps out at you. And your ass tingles. Oh, that was Tingle Vision. Did you guys design the film with 3D? You must have.
Yeah, it was. Everything was designed in 3D. That doesn't mean we particularly like 3D, though.
Interesting. Neither do I.
Ah.
I just find it. I wish there was a way they could do it without
the glasses.
Eyewear. Yeah.
Yes, totally.
I feel like there's a shield between me and the experience, but I did love Wreck-It Ralph in 3D. Does anyone have a question before I ask any more of my dumb questions? Do any of you have a question for the other filmmakers? Do you have something you're wondering, or have you spent so much time in cocktail parties together already, you have nothing to say to each other anymore? No? Okay. Well, think about it. How do you approach, this is for anyone who feels like answering, how do you approach making a film that is suitable for children, yet can also be enjoyed by adults? Or does that even enter your thinking? I mean, I know it does at Disney and DreamWorks. But maybe not everyone has that. These general questions are not going to work because no one's going to volunteer. Jennifer, go ahead.
I can say, you know, even when we work in Wreck-It Ralph, I mean, I can only speak for Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen. You're conscious of it, but we didn't make any choices specifically saying, oh, we need to make this simpler for children or ever, because kids get a lot more than I think people think they do. And we found that the most sophisticated themes of the film, the kids got right away. The adults tend to personalize it. It's all about their lives and how it speaks to them personally. So as much as we, for entertainment value, we like to feel like we're reaching everyone, at the same time, we feel like we don't want to talk down to children. So we don't really ever, you know, say, oh, they won't get this.
Toshio, can I ask you specifically, where do you see animation going next? I know Miyazaki has announced his retirement, much to many people's chagrin. Where do you see it going from here, especially with a loss like a filmmaker like Miyazaki?
そうですね。僕らはスタジオジブリはずっと 2D で約30年間作品を作ってきました。それで途中でその 3D っていうのは出てきたんですけれど、僕らは手法を変えませんでした。それでね、慌ててねその手法を変えたってねうまくいくわけがないと思ったんですよね。それで僕らはですね、とにかくこの 2D に全てをかけてですね、宮崎と一緒に最後までやり抜こうと。でそこまでやりましたけれど、その後のことは若い人たちが考えるだろうから、僕らはそれをどういうものが出てくるかを楽しんで見させていただきます。
So we at Studio Ghibli have been making films for 30 years now. And during that time, of course, 3D came up. But we decided not to change our way of doing things, and we decided to stick with 2D, and we would bet on keeping 2D going. And the reason was that we felt that if we shifted to 3D, there was no way that we could really handle it and do a good job of it. So, but now that it's become the next generation's Studio Ghibli, if the younger generation is interested in doing 3D, then maybe they'll do it. And Mr. Miyazaki and I will look forward to seeing what they come up with.
Well, thank you. I like to do something corny, but I know each of you has this in your brain. I like to just go down the line from that end and say, and just.
You want me to sing?
No, you don't have to sing, unless no, just name one animated film that had what is the earliest animated film that, in your experience, that had an impact on you? Not so much that made you want to get into animation, but the first thing where the light went off, like, this is an incredible art form.
For me, I think it was The Jungle Book, because I loved animals, and there they were all coming to life. And as I look back at it as an adult, the vocal performances were just so amazing. They weren't actors I knew as a kid, but like the Shere Khan and all those different voice actors and coming out of those beautifully drawn characters, that for me was the first one that I really remember and still do.
Yeah?
Damn, you stole that from me.
You can have the same one.
Wow, well, it's that one, plus another one which really sort of opened my eyes into like those transversal thing that you were talking about, like making a movie, animated movies that go from children to adults. particularly animated movies, which have a tendency, like for general public, to be, people think it's mostly for children. The movie that opened my eyes, that changed my mind on that, is Totoro. Just hope I didn't steal anyone's. I hope I stole your movie there.
Go ahead. You have one?
Well, actually, he just stole mine because. So thanks a lot. I didn't watch any animation as a child growing up. I had parents who were avid film goers, but I was going to Kubrick films when other people were going to Disney movies, and just.
I was going to ask if you were Amish, but not if you went to Kubrick films.
So I really started to watch animation when I had my first son, and Totoro was the very first film that really ignited in me this passion for animation.
You can throw one in.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Saturday morning cartoons. That was really my
Speed
first
Racer.
memory. Yeah, Speed
Mach
Racer,
555.
George of the Jungle, all of the great things while our parents were sleeping. You could sneak in. Yeah.
Didier?
The first film I've seen when I was a little child is Bambi from Disney, and I was absolutely moved, and I think it's the film which is deep in my heart. And after that, I discover, of course, the Japanese animation through Miyazaki, and especially Porco Rosso, that I appreciated a lot. So that's my... and of course, one of my master also, it's more cartoonist, it's Tex Avery, which I love those films because I like CGI animation, but I love drawing design animated feature based on the paint, on the painting, and on the hand-drawn animation.
How about you, Benjamin?
Of course, Spirited Away, as you know, and but I must. One of the first films that I was seeing when I was a child was a film called The King and the Bird, a French film by Paul Grimaud, and it was. I didn't realize until I was a teenager that this film had a huge impact on my way of drawing and everything, and I kept drawing a boy and a girl running on the stairs because they run a lot in stairs in The King and the Bird. You have to see it. It's a really beautiful film if you haven't seen it. Yeah, that's it. That's a wonderful film. And I was a big fan of Donald Duck, and I really love this character. I wish there will be a long feature with Donald Duck one day because I think he deserves it. So.
Yeah, definitely. That was my audition for Donald Duck. Toshio?
僕子供の頃ね、ちゃんとアニメーション見てないんですよね。
What a dumb question. That's what he said.
いや僕大人の映画をね、まあこんなこと役に立たないけれど、なんていうの、子供の時大人の映画をね盗み見るのが大好きでした。それで子供ながらにねドキドキするんですよ。分かるところがいろいろあって、でもちろん子供のアニメーションもいろいろ見てたんでしょうけれど、でもねあんまり僕の中ではアニメーションって印象なかったんですね。だからまさか自分がアニメーションの仕事をするとは思いませんでした。
I didn't actually watch much animation when I was a child. I used to like to watch adult films that were made for adults, and they excited me because I thought I understood certain parts and
we have a lot of exciting adult films here in America.
No, I don't mean that. I'm sorry, not that kind of adult film, but regular films. I probably did watch some animation, but I don't remember any. And I never thought that I would be part of producing animation films. Never in my life did I think that.
How about you?
You know what? For its simplicity, its honesty, and its gutsiness, Charlie Brown Christmas is still my favorite.
like some of the gentlemen who went before me, I also did not have the opportunity to see a lot of animation as a child, and was exposed to it for the first time watching with my kids. And like others before me, it was Totoro. And you know, we've talked a lot, or you've talked a lot, acknowledging the visual beauty of the Miyazaki movies, and they are breathtaking. But I'd love to give a shout out too to the music in the movies. The music in Totoro just broke my heart. It's just incredible, and my kids responded to it immediately. Loved it. I'd also like to give a shout out to SpongeBob. That was a big one. I never had laughed that hard with my kids. It was informative for me.
I find it hard to believe you didn't watch a lot of animation, because I come from a family of 6, and I spent a lot of time in front of the TV. And there was a lot of cartoons, but you must have had good parents.
My mom would take the TV and put it in the trunk of her car when she left the house so that I couldn't see it.
Wow.
I think she was running away.
Yeah.
But I'd probably
How
say,
about you,
like,
Kirk?
strictly from the raw power of the vocal performance, I would probably say Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh, come on. Anyway, how about you, Jen?
He just took mine. So, well, I have to go back to the very first one I saw, and first actually I got the little book when I was 2, and then I saw the film a few years later, and it was Cinderella, and I think from that moment on, I became like an escapist dreamer, and all I did was draw and write stories. And
but you did a number on Prince Charming in Frozen, though.
Life
that guy
does
was a
that to you.
Dick.
Yeah. And then,
Did you guys already answer this? No.
This film was already mentioned down the line, but for me, the very first film I saw was Bambi, and it was the humor of Thumper and Bambi out on the ice, but also the emotion of the death of the mother, and I realized that there was something that hit my core with that, and as we make films, I like films that sort of have that range of emotion. I think it's important. It's what makes you feel that you've been watching a big film.
I just have a question, Peter, because the other producers didn't watch cartoons as kids. How about you?
Yeah, but it was all.
Okay.
Yeah, it was all. Yeah, I watched a lot of cartoons as kids, actually.
I'm just curious because the other guy. Okay. So Pinocchio. Pinocchio is mine, and it was not the original release. It was a re-release that I saw in the theaters. I'm not that old, so. But yeah, I loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Loved the whole story. Loved the thing. Loved Monstro coming at me. Remembered it, and I think that was the day that I said, "God, I love animation." So.
Does anyone have a question in the audience that you just have to ask? All right, there's 3. That person, and that person. Those were the first 3. Go ahead, sir. Oh, got a mic.
Is it on? Okay. Is there one special experience or detail that will especially be with you now that you've made these films?
From the making of these films?
From the making.
Is there one special
from
moment?
seeing audience reactions there.
Yeah. Everyone doesn't have to answer, but if anyone has something sticks out, like, wow, I want to carry that with me going forward.
We did a little thing on, what was it, Reddit? Thing a few weeks ago, and there was...
I did one last night.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was fun. But we had one...
We go on the internet, and anyone can ask you anything in the whole world. You answer questions, FYI. Anyone over 40 out there.
It's true. True, thank you. And one woman wrote in, and we had read a few things, that watching Frozen at a bad time in her life had saved her life. And I don't think, we could do anything more than that. So that is a huge thing for us.
Very cool. If there's anyone else, feel free to chime in. This gentleman right here, you can just say it to me and I'll repeat it. Oh, no, here's a microphone. It's your big chance to sing, pal.
I could ask lots of questions, but just for the people who worked on Ernest and Celestine, I wondered, obviously you were inspired by the book and the beautiful illustrations in the story, but you made changes to the design of the characters and to the story itself. I would just be curious, what made you decide to make those changes? Did you initially intend to just translate the book the way it was, and what made you decide to make additions and changes and adjustments?
I will try to answer, because I think when you make an adaptation, especially when it's books, graphic books, you make the adaptation of the story, but also of the drawings, and try to keep much of respect as possible for the original books, but you are obliged to transform the graphism just for animation. Technically, we cannot animate the graphism of Gabriel Vincent, who is an illustrator and has a graphism which is sophisticated and not done for animation. So we are obliged to find a way between animation and what was the graphism of the book. And all the work of Benjamin and the artist designer was to adapt this graphism, but to keep the truth of this graphism, to keep the spirit, to be as close as possible as of the original graphism, but we have to make an animated feature, and so to transform this graphism with avec le maximum de respect I'm
with
sorry.
Maximum respect.
Yes. You understand French?
Un petit.
So the detail which moved the first detail which moved me when I see the first images of the film is when I see Celestine alive under with the pen of Benjamin, and she was not exactly the Celestine of Gabriel Vincent, but she was in the spirit and in the style and in the acting what I imagine if Gabriel Vincent has made this herself this film. I think our principal preoccupation was to be as close as possible of Gabriel Vincent and enough with enough freedom, liberty of adaptation to give life to this graphism, which was not done for animation. I'm not sure I'm clear, but
no,
I try to be.
Parfaitement. J'ai compris. Right? I understand.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Benjamin?
I think I'm good.
You covered it. Okay. So there's the third question. Whoever was the first person here who did it? Was that you, sir, with the hat? I think it was that person back there was the first one who raised his hand, but that's all right. You're younger, so I'll give you and you wore a tie.
What I wanted to ask is the attention to detail to lighting a scene. Things like how lighting falls onto a character's face. What are the discussions that you guys had?
Lighting. That seems to be like a whole department, isn't it?
Yeah. It's if there's no light in the scene, you actually can't see anything. It's really fascinating to me as well. One of the people we partnered with was Roger Deakins on How to Train Your Dragon, And we were looking for a particular look because it was such a fantastic story. We wanted the weight of reality. And we wanted a little bit bolder look. So one of the things we did on How to Train Your Dragon is we resisted the impulse to put lights everywhere, because you can put lights wherever you want. And so I think personally there's a lot of animation that's overlit. And because there's a table and you want to see under the table, and or like you even want to see like the eyes of a character a little bit more, you can place a light. And one of the things that Roger found interesting and fascinating was that he could place a light in a scene and you don't actually see the light, the rig, but you see the light hitting the character. So you can put a light anywhere. But we really held back in ours. So there are scenes in How to Train Your Dragon where the light just falls off and things go into complete lack of detail, like complete blackness. So lighting is, it's one of the most incredible tools, I think in CG animation. The ability to move a camera is gigantic. It's one of the biggest storytelling tools. And one of the other, I think, unsung heroes of this whole thing is light. You can make things feel unreal or very real, depending on how you place them. So it's an art unto itself.
Yeah. And one of the things we did with Frozen, or was a different challenge, was because we had ice and snow, you're also dealing with a lot of like refraction and reflecting light. So what our art director, Mike Giamo, really did was amazing is, he said, snow and ice, you can go white and blue and it's a blank canvas almost. So we're going to use the lighting and particularly the color and the palette to tell the emotional story. And when we studied ice, we started seeing how much color there was and how much we could use that to tell the story. So yes, we'd always know where the sun is and sort of use the lighting, accordingly as you would normally, but in addition to that, we were creating a style with it that we hadn't done before.
There's still a lot of cheating that goes on, like you said. Well, we know where the sun is, but there are shots that you flip-flop a little bit and you just say, it just doesn't look that great. So we, whatever looks best for that moment is what we try to do.
Well, speaking of lighting, I would like to close on this thought. Hearing each of you speak about the films that inspired you initially, and these things that lit this little candle in your mind about animation, this is a flame that needs to be protected from generation to generation. It needs to be kept lit. So on behalf of everyone here tonight, and on behalf of the whole world who've enjoyed your films, first of all, congratulations on your Oscar nominations. And second of all, thank you so much for keeping that little candle of inspiration lit, and I'm sure we'll be talking about your films at a Q&A 20 years from now or longer. Thank you very much. Stand up and take a bow, please. Thanks, everybody.